He didn't speak much English, but the way he looked at me from the top of that lifeguard stand said everything. And when his hand slid across my lower back that afternoon, pulling me just a little closer under the shadow of the tower, I didn't care what language he spoke, because his touch spoke directly to me. I was only supposed to be there for a week. It was a spontaneous trip, a solo vacation booked out of frustration after my last relationship fizzled out like a firework that never exploded. The kind of getaway where you bring too much sunscreen and not enough expectations. I landed in a small coastal town in a country I'd never been to before, where the air smelled like salt and sugar, and strangers smiled like they already knew you. The beach was gorgeous. It stretched endlessly, soft white sand that crunched just right beneath your bare feet. The kind of ocean so blue it looked like someone had adjusted the saturation in real life. There were tourists, but not too many, and locals who were happy to share their little slice of paradise, even if they barely understood your accent. And then there was him. He was perched like a statue on the tallest lifeguard stand, bronzed skin glowing in the sun, dark eyes behind mirrored sunglasses that followed everything on the beach without a single word. His hair was thick and black, tied back loosely, just long enough to curl slightly when wet. He wore a tight red tank top with the name of the local rescue unit written across the chest, in a language I didn't speak. But his arms, they spoke fluently. Every movement was precise, strong, but effortless. And when he scanned the water, legs spread, elbows resting on his thighs, he looked like he had been sculpted to exist nowhere else but there, watching, waiting, ready to dive into chaos with perfect calm. Hey, if you're here and feeling the vibe already, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to support these stories and help more people find them. It means the world, and it keeps us going. Thanks for being here. I passed his stand 5 or 6 times before I got brave enough to smile. The first time he didn't notice. The second, I think he blinked behind those sunglasses. The third, he smiled back. And the fourth time, he waved. It wasn't until the 5th time, when I finally stopped and asked him in broken phrases if the water was safe to swim, that he tilted his head, grinned, and replied, "Is safe. But for you, I watch more close." His accent was thick, warm, and unusual, not Spanish, not French, something harder, rounder, and I couldn't place it. But I didn't care. It made every word sound softer than it was, as if the vowels rolled over smooth stones before reaching me. "My name is Ben," I said, pointing to my chest, laughing nervously. He looked down at me from the edge of the stand like a curious god peering down from the clouds, then tapped his chest and said, "Tariq?" I tried to repeat it. He laughed and corrected me, twice. The way he said his own name felt like a breeze, effortless but powerful. After that, I spent every morning walking by his stand. Sometimes I stopped for a moment to talk, sometimes just to wave. He liked to tease me for my awkward attempts at his language. I teased him for always watching people but never swimming. One day I brought him a cold soda. The next he gave me half of his lunch, a small container of rice, and something spicy that burned my tongue but made me smile. He watched me with amused eyes and shook his head. "Soft mouth," he said, touching my bottom lip lightly with his thumb. That was the first time he touched me. It was innocent, barely a moment, but my entire body reacted like lightning had cracked straight down my spine. He noticed, I could tell. His hand hovered for a second too long before he pulled it back. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't come here to fall for a stranger on a lifeguard stand in a country I didn't understand. But every hour spent in Tariq's presence pulled me deeper into his smile, his voice, the way he'd gesture with his hands when words failed him. One evening, just as the sky began to turn orange and gold, I stopped by the stand again. He was finishing his shift, packing up a red lifeguard bag, folding a towel over his shoulder. I said I'd walk with him even if he didn't ask me to. We reached the base of the tower and he paused, turned to me, eyes flicking to my lips, then back to my eyes. "Up?" he asked softly, pointing at the ladder. I hesitated, then nodded. The inside of the lifeguard stand was small. Wood warmed from the sun, windows open to let in the breeze. It smelled like salt, sweat, and sand. There was only enough room for the two of us to stand close, very close. He stepped toward me. I felt the heat from his body. My breath caught. And then his fingers brushed my cheek, and he leaned in. Not fast, not greedy, but slow, searching, lips hovering just close enough to ask permission with his breath. I didn't speak. I just kissed him, and everything after that changed. His lips were warmer than I expected, soft but full, pressing into mine like he'd been imagining this as long as I had. The kiss wasn't rushed, but there was tension underneath it, like something waiting to break, something restrained but ready to ignite. When he pulled back just an inch, his fingers slid from my jaw to the side of my neck, brushing over my skin with a gentleness that made my knees feel unstable. "I wanted this," he whispered, his accent thick, every syllable like velvet draped over heat. "Long time." I nodded, barely able to breathe. "Me too." We stood there in that tiny wooden tower, our bodies swaying slightly with the breeze, the distant sound of waves crashing below, reminding us we weren't alone, not really. But the world outside felt miles away. Up here it was just me and him. Tariq moved slowly, deliberately, his hand pressing to the center of my chest, fingers exploring the curve of my shoulder, the rise of my collarbone, the shape of me beneath my thin beach shirt. I could feel his breath against my cheek as his nose brushed mine, his lips kissing the corner of my mouth, then my jaw, then just under my ear. Each one softer than the last, but heavier with meaning. He didn't need many words. The way his body moved spoke louder than anything else could. He pressed his forehead against mine and whispered, "You leave soon?" 2 days, I said. He didn't say anything, but his thumb traced a slow circle over my ribs, just beneath the edge of my shirt. "I come with you," he said suddenly, half serious, half joking, but his smile disappeared quickly, like he knew he couldn't make a promise like that. Still, something in me stirred. The idea didn't feel as ridiculous as it should have. Then just as I leaned in for another kiss, we heard a loud bang from below, someone slamming the gate shut as they locked up the last beach shack. The spell broke, and we both froze. Tariq chuckled under his breath and gave me one more kiss, quick this time, full of heat and urgency. "Tomorrow," he said, brushing my cheek. "You come again?" I nodded, heart pounding. As I climbed down the ladder and walked across the darkening beach, my lips still tingling from his, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't just want him, I wanted more of him. And I wasn't sure 2 days would be enough. The next day I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had plans, but because I needed to see him again. I I got to the beach just after sunrise when the sand was still cool beneath my feet and the light cast a soft glow across the water. The tower was empty. His shift hadn't started yet, so I waited. An hour passed, then 2. I ordered a drink from a beachside stall, paced the shore, tried to distract myself by watching families arrive with towels and beach balls, but none of it worked. The anticipation was crawling under my skin like sunburn. Where was he? And then I saw him. Not at the tower, but running. Tariq came from the far side of the beach, shirtless, soaking wet, his red rescue shorts clinging to him, a life buoy in one hand and panic in his eyes. A crowd had gathered near the rocks. Something was wrong. I dropped everything and sprinted across the sand. When I got closer, I saw a tourist, a boy, maybe 10, lying flat on a towel while a woman sobbed beside him, her hands shaking. A man knelt at the boy's head, trying chest compressions, but he was doing it all wrong. Too fast, too light. Tariq pushed through them, dropped to his knees, and shouted something in his language. His voice was calm but sharp, slicing through the chaos. He tilted the boy's head back, started real CPR with expert rhythm, and after a few seconds that felt like eternity, the boy coughed, choked, and gasped. Everyone around him collapsed with relief. Tariq just sat back on his heels, eyes closed, soaking in the silence. My breath caught in my throat. I'd already found him sexy. I'd already found him sweet. But in that moment, soaked, shaking, silent, still full of strength, I saw everything else. Courage, heart, purpose. Later, as the boy was taken away by medics and the crowd slowly drifted back to their umbrellas and towels, I approached him. His hands were trembling. "You okay?" I asked softly. He looked up at me and gave a tired smile. "Today? Not good?" "You saved him," I said, kneeling beside him in the sand. Tariq shook his head. "Lucky. I was swimming. Not supposed to. Not shift yet." "You were exactly where you needed to be," I said. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was nothing but us. The roar of the ocean behind, the whisper of our breath in the space between. Then he stood up suddenly. "Come." "Where?" He didn't answer, just started walking back toward the tower. We climbed up without a word. He shut the small hatch behind us and then he kissed me, rougher this time, desperate, like the weight of the morning was crashing through him and I was the only thing holding him up. His hands were everywhere, on my chest, my back, gripping my waist, pulling me close. My fingers found the edge of his waistband, and he gasped into my mouth, his forehead pressing against mine as we both stood breathless. He whispered, "I need this." "I do too." We didn't need a bed, we didn't need candles, we didn't even need words. We needed touch, closeness, a moment that belonged to no one else. So we had it, right there in that small, swaying tower, the ocean below, and the sun pouring through the windows. And when it was over, when we lay tangled together in the warm hush, he ran his fingers over my arm and whispered, "Tomorrow, you still here?" I nodded, but deep down, something inside me already hurt, because tomorrow was my last day. The next morning, I packed my bag with a knot in my chest. It was my last full day in this place, in this moment, in his world. And I couldn't believe how quickly time had melted. What started as a casual hello to a stranger on a lifeguard stand had become something that lived under my skin now, something that made my heart beat faster every time I thought about his voice, his hands, his kiss. I walked to the beach early again, wanting to catch him before his shift started. But the tower was empty, just like yesterday. So I waited. I waited for over an hour. But this time, he didn't come running from the sea. He didn't appear from the dunes with his buoy in hand or that lazy smile that said, "I see you again." He didn't come at all. I asked one of the lifeguards at the smaller tower, a tall guy with a buzz cut and mirrored shades, if he'd seen Tariq. The guy paused, gave me a weird look, and said, "Tariq? No shift today. Gone." "Gone where?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe home." Home? I stood there in the sand, stunned, the sun too hot on my back now, the sound of the ocean suddenly too loud. He hadn't said anything, not the night before, not that morning. Nothing. Had I misunderstood everything? Was it just a beautiful escape for him? Something to forget? Something casual? Did I take it all too seriously? Or worse, had he lied? I wandered the shoreline in a daze for hours, searching the waves for a glimpse of him. I went to the food stall we always passed, even to the back road that led to the tiny beachside cottages I'd never visited. I looked for any sign of him, anything. Nothing. The day slipped by like wet sand between my fingers, and by late afternoon I was sitting alone near the base of the tower, watching the sun fall toward the horizon. Then I heard it, a shout in a voice I knew. "Ben!" I stood so fast I nearly tripped in the sand. Tariq was running toward me barefoot, his shirt flapping in the wind, a bag slung across his shoulder. He looked exhausted, breathless, but he was smiling. "I find you," he said, chest heaving. "I go home, yes, but only for family. My brother..." He paused, struggling for words. "Accident. I go last night." My heart, which had been curled into a ball of hurt and confusion, cracked open. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He moved closer. "I come to hotel, but they say you leave already." "I didn't," I said. "I waited. All day." Tariq reached for me, cupping my face gently, thumbs brushing my cheeks like he was afraid I'd disappear again. "I think I lose you," he said. "Me too," I whispered. Then he leaned in and kissed me again, this time slow, urgent, full of everything we had almost lost in the space of a day. When he pulled back, we just stared at each other. "I not let go," he said. And even if his words were simple, I felt the weight of them. "But what happens now?" I asked. "I have plan," he said softly, that spark flickering behind his eyes. I blinked. "What kind of plan?" He didn't answer, not with words. He just smiled, took my hand, and said, "One more night." Tariq didn't take me back to the tower this time. Instead, he led me away from the shoreline through winding streets I hadn't walked before, quieter, older, lined with stone and flickering lanterns that glowed like fireflies above cracked stucco walls. We reached a tiny house tucked behind a garden that smelled like salt and citrus. The door creaked open to a room with faded fabric, warm wood, and a small window that overlooked the sea. Everything was soft, intimate, his. He He dropped his bag by the door, turned to me slowly, and said, "No tower tonight. Only here." I nodded, heart already beating faster. In the gentle amber light, he undressed me slowly, like I was something worth remembering. He kissed every inch of me with patience, his hands exploring as if he were mapping something sacred. His breath was hot against my skin, his voice murmuring small words in his language that I didn't understand, but I felt them all the same. We made love without rush, wrapped in each other beneath a single sheet as night deepened around us. Afterward, lying tangled in the quiet hush, I turned my head and whispered, "How do we come back from this tomorrow?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he traced the curve of my shoulder with his fingertips. Then softly, "I not want you leave." I rolled onto my side to face him. "What are you saying?" "I want to go," he said. "With you, your country, try." My heart nearly stopped. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I have friend, cousin in your city. I asked before. I think maybe, but now I want." A rush of warmth and fear hit me all at once. This wasn't just a fling anymore. This wasn't just beach kisses and whispered touches beneath the Lifeguard tower. This was a decision, a life-changing one, and he was placing it between us like a gift wrapped in trust. "But I don't know if it's that easy," I said, trying to breathe through the weight of it. "Visas, jobs, money." "I figure out," he said simply. "You say yes, I figure out." I stared at him, at his dark eyes, his messy hair, the way his chest rose and fell with calm certainty. There was no panic in his voice, no desperation, just quiet confidence, the kind that only comes from someone who means what they say. He brushed a thumb across my lower lip and added, "If I stay, it hurt. Every day I see tower and think of you gone." Tears stung my eyes, sudden and sharp. I didn't cry often, but this moment cracked something open inside me, because for the first time in a long time, someone was choosing me, not just in the moment, but for what came after. I leaned in, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Then let's figure it out together." He smiled, and even though the morning sun hadn't risen yet, I knew we were already beginning something new. The morning after was quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy in a beautiful way, like both of us were still holding on to the warmth of the night before. The sheets were tangled between us, one of his legs still wrapped around mine, his breath soft on my chest. We didn't speak much, just kissed slowly, got dressed lazily, and made coffee in chipped mugs that he said were his grandmother's. He played music I didn't understand, and I laughed when he tried to dance in the narrow kitchen, almost knocking over a broom with his elbow. It felt like the start of something real. But around noon, he told me he had to leave for a little. "Just 1 hour," he said, pulling on his red uniform. "Talk to friend about plan." "Your cousin?" I asked. He nodded, then kissed me hard, once on the mouth, once on the forehead, and was out the door before I could ask anything else. I stayed in the house, sipping leftover coffee, flipping through an old photo album he had left open on the table. It was full of beach days, Lifeguard team shots, family parties, Years of his life I hadn't seen before. He looked younger, skinnier, but always with that same intense energy behind his eyes. And then something strange. A printed email tucked behind the album. I wasn't looking to snoop, honestly. But when it fluttered out and hit the floor, I reached for it without thinking. It was a confirmation, a plane ticket, leaving tonight. But it wasn't for my city. It was to a country halfway across the world. My stomach dropped. I read it again and again. He hadn't said anything about this, not last night, not this morning. He had told me he was ready, told me he wanted to try to figure it out with me. Was this his real plan? Had he just said what I wanted to hear to soften the goodbye? By the time he returned, a little more than an hour later, I was sitting on the edge of his bed, the paper in my hand, my heart thundering in my chest. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me holding it. He didn't speak. Neither did I. For a long, terrible moment, the room was frozen. Then he exhaled and said, "I won't tell you. Last night, but what?" I asked, voice shaking. "You just promised me forever, and now I find this?" "It old plan," he said. "Before you, before us. I not cancel yet, but I will. I was going to." "You should have told me," I whispered. "I afraid," he said. "If plan don't work, I lose both. This and you." The room was quiet again, but not the soft quiet from this morning. This was the quiet that comes before a storm. I stood up, feeling the distance between us like a wall I couldn't climb. "I don't want to be someone you almost choose," I said. His jaw clenched. "You are not almost. You are only." I stared at him, torn between wanting to believe him and wondering if I was just the thing he reached for because he didn't know what else to hold on to. He stepped forward. "You say one night," he said. "But now I want more. If you believe me, I stay." My heart was still pounding, but something in his eyes, desperate, open, afraid, told me he wasn't lying. Not really, he was just scared. And so was I. Still, I said nothing, because I didn't know yet. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. Tariq lay beside me, barely breathing, as if afraid that even the rise of his chest might push me further away. His arm was across my stomach, but loose, like he wasn't sure if he was still allowed to hold me. By sunrise, I had made my decision. We walked in silence back to the beach, the same beach where I first saw him on that lifeguard stand. The same beach where I thought I could spend 1 week forgetting the real world, and somehow ended up wanting to build a new one. He stopped just before the tower and looked at me, eyes dark with hesitation. "I'd cancel the flight," he said. I nodded. "Okay." "But," he added, and my heart jumped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his passport, tucked inside a folded paper. "The cancellation receipt?" "I stay," he said quietly, holding it out to me. "Not just for you, for me." Something hit the back of my throat, hard and warm, the kind of emotion that doesn't come from just love, but trust. The kind you don't ask for, but someone gives you anyway. People were starting to fill the beach. Early swimmers, families with umbrellas, surfers dragging boards behind them, and the air was slowly buzzing with life. But all I could hear was the thumping of my heart. And then he did something I didn't expect. Tariq climbed the tower, not in his uniform, not on duty, just barefoot, shirtless, as if it were any other morning. Except this time, when he reached the top, he turned around, looked straight at me and said, loud enough for half the beach to hear, "Ben, come up." People turned, some stared, my face flushed. He didn't move, just held his hand out, waiting. I didn't think, I didn't care. I climbed. Every rung of that ladder felt like peeling away fear, like saying yes to something scary and beautiful at the same time. When I reached the top, he didn't wait. He grabbed my face and kissed me. Fully, deeply, with everyone watching. There were gasps, scattered applause. Someone whistled, but none of it mattered. His mouth was on mine, his hands on my neck, his body pressed to mine in the sunlight, and I didn't want to be anywhere else on earth. When we pulled apart, breathless, he leaned in and whispered, "Now, you believe?" I nodded. I never stopped. And then, in the silence between us, with the sea stretching out behind him, he whispered words I didn't expect. Soft, careful, unsure. "I think I love you." The world tilted. The lifeguard tower swayed gently, and I whispered back, "I know I love you." The crowd eventually moved on. People went back to their beach towels, their games, their stories. Maybe a few would remember the kiss. Maybe they wouldn't. But for me, that moment on top of the tower, held in his arms, wasn't something that would fade with the tide. It had imprinted itself onto me. Later that afternoon, after we climbed back down and walked barefoot across the sand, we sat under a tattered umbrella, sharing a sandwich that was too dry and too warm. But it didn't matter. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. He kept glancing at me like he couldn't believe I was still there. And I kept touching him. Not in a sexual way, but in that unconscious, addicted kind of way. My hand kept drifting to his thigh, his back, the curve of his shoulder, just to remind myself that he was real. This was real. That evening we returned to the tower one last time. Not to make out, not to touch, but to watch the sunset. We brought a blanket and sat quietly, legs tangled, his head on my shoulder, as the sky turned orange and then pink and then a deep, dusky blue. "This is where you found me," he said softly. "I think you found me too," I replied. He reached into his lifeguard bag and pulled out something folded. A piece of paper, crumpled at the edges, familiar. It was the email confirmation for his canceled flight. He handed it to me. "Keep this," he said. "So next time you ask if I'm staying for you, you know." I took it slowly, folded it again, and tucked it into my wallet. Then I leaned over and kissed his temple. "I'm not going to ask again," I said. "You've answered everything already." We sat there until the stars came out, until the lights from the bars down the beach flickered to life and music floated in from the distance. Eventually we climbed down for the night, walking slowly back toward his place. But right before we left the beach entirely, I stopped and looked up at the tower. He did too, and he smiled. "That's ours now," he said, lacing his fingers through mine. "Yeah," I whispered. "Forever." Hey, if you're hearing this right now, that means you made it all the way to the very end of the story. And I just want to say thank you for listening, truly. Let's do something fun. If you made it here, drop a comment that says, The tower is ours now. Just those 5 words. That way, we'll know exactly who the real ones are. The ones who felt every kiss, every moment, and every breath. Until the next story, stay close, stay soft, and never forget the spark you felt here.